Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara Designs, and today we're going to make a set of these pastel Christmas cards. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to cut all of my cardstock first. I'm going to do this very assembly line. So every step we're going to do 4 times just because I'm making 4 cards. So I do have 4 bases sitting on the side there, and they are an A2 sized base. And then for the black mat, I'm going to cut it down 1/4 inch smaller, so you have a small border around the edges. So this will be cut to 4 and 5 1/4 inches, and then of course my colored panel will be cut to 1/4 inches smaller than that. So 3 3/4 by 5. So I am, hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'm really bad for eyeballing measurements, but I'm trying really hard to do measurements in this because it is a very clean and simple design. I really want everything to be cut properly so that it's really easy to tell that they are supposed to be a card set. And I kind of struggle with that. So I don't often make sets of cards, first off, because I don't generally make a design that's easily created into several cards. But also I generally tend towards a very elaborate card. So this is probably the closest I would ever get to a clean and simple card, just because it is something that's pretty easily reproducible, and I tried really hard not to go over the top with it. And so for the 4 colors of cardstock that I use, they're all from Simon Says Stamp. I have Cotton Candy, Mint, Lavender, and Sea Glass. And then I'm cutting down a piece for the sentiment. So I have the Simon Says Stamp Joy to You and Yours stamp set, which it's a phenomenal stamp set if you're looking for something that has a lot of Christmas sentiments in it and a lot of variation in the Christmas sentiments. So I cut this little piece down. These are being cut to 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 because it fits that sentiment you just saw in the bottom left corner really well. And then I'm going to cut the black mat for that to be 3 1/2 by 2 1/2, so that there's exactly that 1/4 inch around every border so that it's really matching. Because when I do a clean and simple card, I really want it to be, very similar across the board. Like they need to be, I don't know, I'm a lot pickier when I do clean and simple cards than when I do like a mixed media card or, a card I'm going to add splatter to, or just because there's more going on to catch the eye, right? So you're not going to look at it and be like, oh, look, this is crooked, or, oh, look, this isn't well done, that kind of thing. So I do tend to be a bit more specific in my clean and simple cards, which is probably why I don't make them as often, because I struggle a bit with stopping myself from adding everything in the kitchen sink to my cards. And I don't always have designs that I think lend themselves well to a clean and simple card. But I really want to include in this series something that was easily mass producible, if that's something that you really wanted to do. I mean, some people send, hundreds of Christmas cards. So I always try to kind of diversify my art palette here so you guys can have a lot of different looks of cards if that's something that's more interesting to you than, all the ink smooshing and color blending and that kind of thing. So, and of course, you don't have to do it in pastels. Obviously, I am doing that just because I love non-traditional Christmas cards. Something about them makes me really happy. So I do tend towards the non-traditional colors for my Christmas cards. But of course you could have done these in like reds and greens and had like a gold mat or a silver mat, like that kind of thing. It's just that I chose to go with a more, in this case, pastel palette, because I thought that it would look really pretty and just kind of, I don't know, it's eye-catching. So that's kind of my thought process there. So I did stamp that sentiment down with my Misti so that I could multi-stamp it. I stamped it twice on everything. I honestly think it's just because my Versamark is getting a little bit dry, so I had to stamp it a bit more to get it a really good impression. And then I coated it with Brutus Monroe's Sparkle Alabaster embossing powder. I chose to use that one just because it's sparkling, and you guys know that I love my sparkle, and because I thought it would be just something different on the palette. So it just adds a little bit of something extra on the panel rather than just white heat embossing. But I have noticed that the sparkle is not quite as stark white as the alabaster one is. And I think that's only because there's sparkles in it. So of course you're not getting all embossing powder, you're getting embossed powder and sparkles. So it just kind of doesn't lay the same way on the panel because I own Alabaster as well. I use both. And then for some added interest in the background panel, I brought in some stamps from the Simon Says Stamp Snow Love stamp set, and I just kind of laid them out in the top and the bottom corner here. And that's because they're going to show behind the panel. So you have a little more interest in each panel. And of course, it's the same embossing powder that I'm using over top of it. That's just that Alabaster Sparkle. And as I said, there are going to be slight skips in some of the stamping. That doesn't really bother me because, again, it's in the background, so it's not super noticeable. But because I'm pretty sure my Versamark is a little bit dry, I need to re-ink it. But because it's a little bit dry, the embossing powder didn't stick as well as I had hoped in some areas. Now you could fix this. I didn't remove the stamps from my Misti while I was doing this, so I could have gone in and stamped over top again and kind of layered up my embossing powder. But I find that you lose detail when you do that a little bit. And it's the background panel, so it's not, I didn't feel it was necessary. But if you didn't like that little bit of skipping in the embossing powder, you absolutely could, and you would get a more full coverage. Or, re-ink your embossing, and then you wouldn't have that problem either. But just a couple of ideas if that's something that's going to bother you. I don't mind because, again, it's the background panel. I don't even think it's super noticeable once the cards are actually put together. But I mean, it's completely up to you as to what you feel is going to look the best. Imperfections don't bother me because, I mean, as a general rule, I have never had someone receive one of my cards and be like, oh, a handmade card. Like, I've never had someone be that, be any kind of negative about it. So, as I believe it's Jennifer Guire who says it's handmade, not Hallmark. So having slight imperfections, I don't think takes away from a handmade card. I think that it, signifies that someone took their time to put this together for you. So I don't think that imperfections are a bad thing, but of course it's completely up to you. It's your card marking. You need to do what makes your heart happy at the end of the day. And so if you want to, restamp it, do it. And I mean, a cardstock has both two sides. So if you feel like you didn't like the stamping, re-ink the inker and then do it again on the other side. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I know some people get really upset. I was reading the comments. I haven't answered to them, but I was reading the comments on one of my older videos, and someone was talking about how they get really impatient with die cutting cardstock. And that's really too bad because I'm like, there's so many fun cardstocks out there that just need a little extra attention because they can be a bit of a pain in the arse to cut. Like Yupo. See, I struggle to cut Yupo. It is such a pain in the arse to cut for me. But I've created some stunning cards with cut Yupo. So it's always interesting the different things that make people, frustrated. Whereas to me, cardstock not cutting isn't really that frustrating just because I'm like, well, whatever, it's fine. I'll make it work regardless. Whereas some people find it really frustrating. So it's just always super interesting to read what you guys are saying to me because it's really fascinating to get to know everybody and see what you enjoy about creating or what frustrates you about creating or if there's anything I can do to help. I know that there was another person who recently mentioned that they can't get their cardstock to cut straight. The problem with that comment is that there was no question and there was no context. So I'm not really sure if they're asking me for advice or just venting about frustration. Fair either direction. I'm good with either way, but I'm like, I read it and I went to my husband and I'm like, I'm not sure if are they asking me a question? Like, do they want my advice? Do they just want to vent? So they need someone to listen to their frustration? Like, I'm not sure what this person is kind of needing from me based on this comment, but it's always super interesting to hear what you guys are thinking or what you're doing or what's frustrating you or what you're creating or, I love it when you guys leave comments and there's a chance for me to read and get to know you and, what you're creating or what you're doing or what's going on. It's super, super interesting to me. So you saw me adhere everything with my liquid glue. That's just because it's easier for me to arrange where I want the item to sit. So I did use liquid glue for that. But then for this part, to actually put on the little labels or the little sentiment pieces, I brought out my Big Mama foam tape, also from Simon Says Stamp. Pretty much everything from on this card is honestly from Simon Says Stamp. I don't know why. It wasn't intentional. I busted out some stuff I wanted to work with and then realized that it all happened to be from Simon. It's kind of funny. But I love their Big Mama foam tape. I've had this roll for a long, this is the only roll I've purchased so far. So like I've had this roll for a long time and it's still going strong. And it's called Big Mama just because of the size of the roll, not the thickness of the foam tape. It is actually a very, very low profile foam tape, which I love because I'm likely going to mail these to my pen pals, which they live all over the world. So I do tend to like to add dimension to things. I think that it just really helps a design stand against itself so that it kind of gives that, you know, like lift out from the background, though it is all the same color. I just think that it looks really pretty. This would look really cool too if you had done a lighter cardstock on the front and then a darker cardstock in the back, like of the same color family, of course, but I think that look would be really pretty too. Maybe I'll have to try that with a different design down the road. But I did bring out my T-square ruler just to make sure that I was actually lining them up straight, though I am eyeballing the center. And you know what, honestly, they're not perfect. But again, I can't see somebody coming back and being like, oh, you gave me this card that you worked really hard on and it's not straight. Or it's not perfect. Like I cannot see somebody saying that. And if they do, they're never getting a card again. I'm gonna be honest. Because that's just not very nice when someone's gone out of their way to make something handmade for you. But that is just my thought. I did have to add just a couple of little sparkles on the cards just because I couldn't resist. You don't need to. They're pretty on their own. This is just because I like to add all sorts of things to my cards. So I did add 5 gems, 3 on the top, 2 on the bottom, in the centers of the snowflakes, to just add a little bit of extra bling. It is Icy Sparkle, I believe these ones are. Yeah, Icy Sparkle. And they're really subtle, but they have like just a clear glitter inside, or like a slightly white glitter inside. Super, super pretty. Adds just a little, adds just a little bit of a shine to the card, and they look super, super pretty. So not necessary, but I love them, so I added them, and they're in my stash, so why not? And then here I'm trying to catch that sparkle. Honestly, you can't, it's just not doing it justice, because that sparkle is so, so pretty. But you see what I mean when I say that the embossing is just a touch imperfect. And you know what, honestly, I kind of like it on a card like this, because the card is fairly simple, so the fact that the embossing is a little bit skippy kind of gives it, I don't know, a more whimsical feel. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think of the cards. You know that I love them, or I wouldn't have created them. So let me know what you think of how they turned out. You guys know I love to read the comments, and please leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I have new videos every Monday and Thursday, and we're getting close to the end of Christmas in July, which is crazy. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon.